Living in a homeowners association, or HOA, can often feel like being part of a small, tightly knit community where everyone knows each other's business. For many residents, it's an opportunity to enjoy a well-maintained neighborhood with shared amenities and a sense of order. However, for me, it quickly turned into a battleground thanks to one particularly overzealous member. Let's call her Karen. From the moment I moved in, Karen seemed to take it upon herself to monitor the neighborhood like some self-appointed gatekeeper. She had a knack for nitpicking even the smallest details, whether it was my slightly unkempt lawn or the way my trash cans were positioned on collection day. Though I tried to brush off her comments and keep the peace, I soon realized that her obsession with enforcing the rules went far beyond friendly reminders. It all came to a head one sweltering afternoon when Karen decided to escalate matters. Frustrated by what she perceived as my disregard for the HOA regulations, she picked up her phone and made an emergency call to 911, claiming I was causing a disturbance and needed to be evicted. Little did she know that her dramatic move would backfire spectacularly. As fate would have it, the deputy responding to her call wasn't just any officer. He was my upstairs neighbor, who had witnessed the whole messy affair unfold from his balcony. This unexpected twist would soon reveal the absurdity of Karen's actions and change the dynamics of our community forever. The incident that sparked Karen's call to 911 was, in hindsight, almost comical in its triviality. It all began on a Saturday afternoon when I decided to host a small gathering for a few friends. We were simply enjoying each other's company, playing some music and sharing laughter in the backyard. It wasn't a raucous party, just a handful of neighbors unwinding after a long week. However, it didn't take long for the sounds of our gathering to reach Karen's ears. Living just down the street, she had an uncanny ability to hear anything that went on within the community. I could only imagine her peering out from behind her curtains, clutching her phone tightly, judging us for daring to have fun, without her approval. As the volume of our laughter and music increased slightly, so did Karen's irritation. Instead of coming over to voice her concerns directly, she chose the nuclear option. In her mind, it seemed more appropriate to escalate the situation than to approach me like a neighbor would. Fueled by her disdain for anything that deviated from her version of proper living standards, she dialed 911 and reported what she claimed was a disturbance. In that moment, I felt a mix of disbelief and irritation. How could someone view a harmless gathering as a threat? Little did Karen know that her dramatic response would not only draw the attention of law enforcement, but would also set off a series of events that would expose her overreach and reveal the unexpected connections within our community. As Karen's frustration reached its boiling point, she picked up her phone and made the fateful call to 911. I can only imagine how she painted the scene on the other end of the line. With her characteristic flair for dramatics, she likely described us as a rowdy mob, wreaking havoc in our quiet neighborhood. "There's a disturbance," she might have said, her voice trembling with urgency. "I think they're violating HOA rules and causing a real problem." The absurdity of Karen's claims became even clearer when I later learned that she had insisted we were creating a noise level that was unbearable, essentially an emergency in her eyes. In reality, our gathering was nothing more than a few friends sharing drinks and stories under the setting sun, laughter mingling with the soft tunes playing in the background. Yet, to Karen, it was a gross infringement on her idea of community decorum. Meanwhile, as the call was being dispatched, I continued to enjoy my time with friends, completely unaware of the storm brewing just a few doors down. It wasn't until I noticed the flashing lights reflecting off my patio that reality hit me, like a cold splash of water. I stepped inside to investigate, puzzled and slightly anxious about what could have possibly gone wrong. The arrival of law enforcement took me by surprise, but it wasn't until I saw the deputy stepping out his cruiser that everything would turn upside down. Little did Karen know that her overzealous attempt to control the situation would soon unravel in front of her eyes, especially since the officer was someone who lived right above me. As the deputy stepped out of his cruiser, I felt a rush of relief mixed with disbelief. There he was, Officer Mike, the affable neighbor I'd shared casual conversations with in the hallway and exchanged pleasantries during our brief encounters in the parking lot. Seeing him in uniform added a surreal twist to an already bizarre situation. I couldn't help but wonder how he would handle this farce that Karen had orchestrated. Officer Mike approached my backyard with a bemused expression, clearly trying to gauge the scene unfolding before him. He glanced around at my friends, who were now standing awkwardly, unsure what to do next. I could see him processing the situation, what he had anticipated versus the reality he was witnessing. Instead of a chaotic party, he found a small group of neighbors laughing softly and sipping drinks, completely unaware that someone had deemed us a menace. Upon reaching me, Mike leaned in slightly, lowering his voice as if to keep our conversation private. "So what's going on here?" he asked with a knowing smile. I couldn't help but chuckle as I explained Karen's complaint and how trivial it all seemed. He nodded in understanding, clearly familiar with Karen's penchant for blowing things out of proportion. As we talked, I saw Karen lurking nearby, her face a mix of confusion and irritation as she tried to comprehend why her emergency call was resulting in my immediate eviction. The realization slowly dawned on her that not only was she making a fool of herself, but she was also unwittingly putting Officer Mike in an awkward position, one that only added fuel to the fire of our neighborhood dynamics. As Officer Mike and I exchanged a few lighthearted remarks, the tension began to dissipate, turning what could have been an awkward encounter into a moment of camaraderie. He clearly found the whole situation amusing, especially knowing Karen's reputation for overreacting. "You'd think we were throwing a wild party or something," I said with chuckle, gesturing to my friends who were now nervously eyeing the deputy. Mike smiled and shook his head. "You'd be surprised what some people consider a disturbance. I've seen it all in this neighborhood." His understanding tone put me at ease. We both knew that this was more about Karen's need for control than any actual violation of the law. As we continued to chat, I could see Karen shifting uncomfortably in the background, her frustration mounting with every passing moment. Mike decided to address her directly, walking over to where she stood with arms crossed, looking entirely out of place amidst the light-hearted atmosphere. "Karen," he said calmly, "I just spoke with your neighbor here. There's no issue at all." The look on Karen's face was priceless, a combination of disbelief and indignation as she tried to defend her position. "But they're breaking HOA rules," she protested, her voice rising slightly. Mike simply raised an eyebrow and replied, "I'm not here to enforce HOA regulations. I'm here for safety concerns. And it looks like there are none." Watching this exchange gave me a sense of satisfaction. It was clear that Mike wasn't buying into Karen's drama, and his demeanor sent a strong message. Sometimes, the rules of community living shouldn't overshadow common sense and neighborly kindness. As the reality of the situation began to sink in, Karen's reaction was almost theatrical. The flush of color on her cheeks indicated her embarrassment, but her pride wouldn't allow her to back down gracefully. She stood there, arms crossed tightly, a frown etched across her face like a mask of indignation. It was clear she hadn't anticipated being called out in front of both the deputy and my friends. "Are you really going to take their side?" she exclaimed, her voice rising with incredulity. "This is exactly why we need strict rules in our community. They're disrespecting our neighborhood." Her words came tumbling out in a desperate attempt to salvage her authority, but they fell flat against a backdrop of laughter and camaraderie that surrounded us. Mike maintained a calm demeanor, trying to defuse the tension further. "Karen, I'm not here to judge anyone's party plans or HOA adherence. I just responded to a call about a disturbance. And from what I see, it's quite the opposite." The deputy's steady gaze seemed to pierce through Karen's defenses, leaving her scrambling for a rebuttal. In that moment, I felt a mixture of sympathy and amusement for Karen. It must have been hard for someone so accustomed to wielding power over others to suddenly find herself on the losing end of this absurdity. As she sputtered her protests, my friends exchanged glances, some barely concealing their smiles at the unfolding drama. Ultimately, Karen's inability to admit defeat only deepened the divide between us. Instead of acknowledging that she may have overreacted, she doubled down on her stance, setting the stage for what will become an ongoing saga within our community. As the dust settled from the commotion, the dynamics within our community began to shift. What had started as a tense confrontation quickly turned into a shared experience that brought many neighbors closer together. In the days that followed, I received an outpouring of support from others in the neighborhood who had witnessed Karen's antics or heard about the incident secondhand. People began to approach me more frequently, offering words of encouragement, and even sharing their own stories of run-ins with Karen. "You're not alone," one neighbor said, laughing as she recounted how Karen once tried to reprimand her for leaving her holiday decorations up too long. It seemed that this wasn't just an isolated incident, but rather part of a larger pattern of Karen's overbearing behavior. In a way, my small gathering had inadvertently united the community against a common source of frustration. Conversations flourished in the hallways and at the mailboxes, with laughter replacing previous whispers of discontent. Neighbors began to bond over shared experiences, discussing not only their grievances, but also their hopes for a more supportive atmosphere in our HOA. Even some of Karen's staunchest supporters began to rethink their positions as they witnessed her meltdown firsthand. There was a palpable sense that people were ready to stand together against unreasonable demands and petty disputes that had plagued our neighborhood for too long. The whole experience taught us that while HOAs can sometimes foster division through strict rules, they can also create opportunities for solidarity and camaraderie. In this case, it became clear that we could choose to be more than just residents. We could be a community willing to support one another against overreach and absurdity. Reflecting on the events that transpired, I found myself grappling with complexities of HOA culture. On one hand, these organizations are designed to maintain property values and foster a sense of community through shared standards. But on the other hand, they can also breed an environment ripe for conflict and control, particularly when individuals like Karen take it upon themselves to enforce the rules with zeal. The incident highlighted how easily minor grievances can escalate into major confrontations when people prioritize regulations over neighborly respect. While I understand the importance of rules in preserving our neighborhood's aesthetics and harmony, it became evident that strict adherence without room for flexibility could lead to absurd situations. Karen's actions were a clear reminder that the spirit of community sometimes gets lost in the shuffle of enforcing policies. Moreover, I realized that many residents felt similarly stifled by the looming presence of HOA regulations. The fear of being reported or reprimanded for minor infractions had created an atmosphere of unease among neighbors. My experience became a catalyst for conversations about how we could redefine what it meant to live in our community, not just as residents bound by rules, but as people who support and uplift one another. In this light, our neighborhood faced an opportunity for transformation. We could choose to embrace a more collaborative approach, prioritizing communication and understanding over strict enforcement. If my gathering served as a turning point, it was one that reminded us all that laughter and friendship often hold more power than any set of written guidelines. Ultimately, we could shape our community into a place where respect and kindness reign supreme, rather than fear of reprimand. As I reflect on the whirlwind of events surrounding Karen's 911 call, I realize that this experience has been more than just a humorous anecdote. It has imparted valuable lessons about community, empathy, and the importance of perspective. The situation revealed how easily misunderstandings can escalate when individuals prioritize strict adherence to rules over basic human connection. It was a stark reminder that while guidelines are important for maintaining order, they should never overshadow the spirit of neighborliness. The support I received from my fellow residents highlighted the strength of community bonds that can flourish when people come together in times of adversity. Instead of allowing fear or frustration to dictate our interactions, we discovered that open communication is key. We learned the importance of addressing concerns directly with one another rather than resorting to escalation or confrontation. Moreover, this incident served as an opportunity for us to challenge the status quo within our HOA. It became clear that fostering an environment of understanding and collaboration could lead to a more harmonious living experience for all residents. As we moved forward, we began discussing ways to encourage dialogue among neighbors and create a more inclusive atmosphere where everyone felt heard. Ultimately, my unexpected encounter with Karen and the deputy not only reinforced my belief in the power of community, but also reminded me that laughter can often diffuse tension. In navigating complexities of HOA culture, it's crucial to balance the need for structure with kindness and respect. As we continue to build our neighborhood together, I hope we carry these lessons forward, creating a place where all residents feel welcome and valued, rather than fearful of being reported or reprimanded.